With Julio Urias' future in serious doubt, we'll catch up on the latest for him and the Dodgers. Cooper Kupp sits in a Minnesota waiting room, waiting for the doctors while Rams opening day looms, and the Galaxy may be on the verge of ridding themselves of a serious headache. Good morning, I'm James. This is your daily dose of sports and snark for the greatest sports city in the world, Los Angeles. This is the faithful Angelenos Morning Report. So it is September 5th, 2023. We have an absolute ton to get to. Before we do, we added a new subscriber yesterday to the Angeleno Familia. Thank you for getting in on the ground floor. Now, if you like being in the know about LA sports, clickety-clack the like button. Clickety-clack the subscribe button. There's a notification bell. Hit that. It'll let you know we drop new content. Sharing is caring. Let people know we exist. And comment. There's always interesting stuff to talk about when it comes to LA. So before we go through the news and notes and look at the scoreboard, there were not any games going on with LA teams yesterday. So I just stared at my wife until she told me to stop. Meanwhile, today, Dodgers are at Marlins, 3:30. Clayton Kershaw, 12-4 with a 2.48 ERA versus Jesus Luzardo, 9-8, 3.62 ERA. The Sparks are in Connecticut for a game at 4. The Sparks have a tenuous half-game lead for the final WNBA playoff spot, which is still on the line. Nneka Ogwumike missed Sunday's game due to discomfort. She's clearly their best player. We do not know if she's playing tonight. But let's get to the news. Yesterday was a day for very few facts and a lot of emotion after it was learned that Dodgers starter Julio Urias was arrested for the second time in 4 years in a domestic violence case. I don't say that or anything I'm about to say as some sort of pseudo-defense attorney looking to stick up for Urias. I don't say it as an apologist for anyone. I say that as a former reporter. And sometimes, to be frank, news is gross, but you have to say it anyway because people need to be informed. You know, in covering crime, you do have to stick with the facts. You kind of have to pull a lot of the opinions out of the way. Now, I posted an original special report yesterday morning. Here is what we have learned since I posted it at about, say, 9:45. That the alleged attack took place in Exposition Park, the neighborhood between South Central LA and USC's campus. Now, this makes sense because Urias was part of a celebrity guest list that watched LAFC play Lionel Messi and Inter Miami on Sunday night. 2, that the Dodgers did not allow Julio Urias to join the team as it flew cross country to Miami for tonight's series. Agent Scott Boras has no comment on behalf of his client. And also, that nobody in the history of baseball has faced multiple suspensions from Major League Baseball under its domestic violence policy. Urias is a groundbreaker in that sense. Again, gross, totally get it. Urias was originally suspended 20 games back in 2019. Back then, though, that was for a misdemeanor that was dropped before it even went to court. Today, Urias is facing felonies. Now, if it were another 20 games, Urias would be eligible to return during the final week of the season. Major League Baseball hasn't spoken yet. That, however, is unlikely, the 20 games, because it's a misdemeanor back then as opposed to felonies now, as opposed to the second time Julio Urias has been arrested now. You have to figure that the punishment would increase. And because of that, just from the sheer length of the suspension alone, there is a legit chance that he could miss all or part of the playoffs, which in turn calls to question whether we would ever see Urias in a Dodgers uniform again. Now, as you might imagine, with what little that we have to go on now, opinions are in overdrive, and I do want to address some of them. I did go on Twitter. People claim that they saw things. This is an extremely irresponsible thing to go on social media to do. You go to the police. You don't go to social media. If you care about the alleged victim, you go to the police. And then the police would be probably very clear in saying you do not go to social media. The reason you don't do that is because it's cruel. It's cruel because if you're lying, you're harming somebody. Facts matter in the court of law, more so than for social media likes. There's also an extremely irresponsible report on a Latin news website that named who Urias is dating. It's irresponsible because it never wrote that the girlfriend was the alleged victim, but including details about this girlfriend, you are making the strong implication that she was the alleged victim in this attack. All of it is unsubstantiated. You don't know if Julio Urias took that lady. You don't know which lady went to the game. I'm not reporting what I cannot validate. What I will say is that there must be cameras all over Exposition Park, that the LAPD is likely just going through it frame by frame, like the Zapruder film, for Pete's sakes. Because that park, it's, like I said, the link from USC to South Central. The park has cameras. It must, because it's not just cameras for the Coliseum. It's not just cameras for BMO Park or Stadium. It's because Exposition Park has a bunch of museums there, a lot of valuable stuff. The place has a space shuttle, for Pete's sakes, a piece of the moon. Of course there's going to be cameras there. Fans of other teams, particularly in the NL West, are taking delight in the case. Okay, fine. I can live with that. But in my opinion, it comes with a caveat. When people make fun of the Dodgers if a player gets arrested, when we make fun of other cities for a player getting arrested, we all have to acknowledge that we root for teams knowing that some of the players are likely bad people. That is an unwritten contract that we fans make with the team. Prominent Lakers have been arrested. Same for the Kings, the Rams. So, for example, if a fan of the Slum Diego Padres craps on the Dodgers, or Dodger fans about who has more class, please remind him that he likely has a Sean Merriman jersey hidden somewhere in the back of his closet. Now, as for the Dodger fans, I will say this. Of course, I'm one. I have yet to see a single Dodger fan tweeting or Xing support for Urias. Not one. Haven't seen it. Many of them right now want him off the team and out of baseball. The prevailing opinion seems to be that if we Dodger fans were willing to be patient for 2019, or even a little forgiving because it was a misdemeanor back in 2019, the opinion now among Dodger fans appears to be that a pattern has emerged for this guy. I'm simply waiting for the facts because that is my instinctual reaction as a former newspaper reporter. That's it. Do not take anything I say as support for Urias or whatever. I don't blame anyone at all for feeling the way that they do after what they saw or what they read yesterday. If I were to guess how the Dodgers play this out for the rest of the season, I'm going to tell you though, I'm extremely skeptical that this hurts the team as much as the national press wants you to believe it does. Julio Urias had a 4.6 ERA. Julio Urias allowed 11 earned runs in his last 2 starts. He allowed 5 earned runs in 5 innings from his last start, which was a loss to the Braves. And by the way, as most of us believe, the Dodgers and Braves are on a collision course to see each other in the NL Championship Series. You could even say that with his stats this year, there was a question as to whether Urias would make the postseason rotation. Clayton Kershaw's been better. Bobby Miller's been better. You could argue the same for Lance Lynn. So that leaves a hole at 4th starter because the Dodgers are not going to go with a 3-man rotation in the playoffs. Is that where Walker Buehler steps in? Ryan Pepio? Do you see where I'm saying here? So is it really that much of a loss for the Dodgers? Finally, we had already been speaking about Urias all season on this channel. This is his free agent year. That he was one of baseball's best pitchers prior to the season. And that he was in line for a 9-figure contract. Hundreds of millions. The idea that upgrading the rotation for next year, though, the most likely way is probably going to be in a trade. Here's why. The Dodgers promoted a lot of minor leaguers to the bigs this season with mixed results. It's way too early to think that Emmett Sheehan is going to be a number 2 starter. We don't know. We talked about this last week. In free agency, the top 2 starting pitchers in free agency, the top 2 are Shohei Ohtani, whose agent said that elbow surgery was inevitable and who's going to see a doctor today to see if he needs to shut it down completely right now. That's the top starter. And if he gets Tommy John surgery, he's not pitching next year. And after that, number 2 is Julio Urias. So after that, if you're looking for free agents, maybe you're in a bidding war for the Padres' Blake Snell or Phillies' Aaron Nola. But for the most part, for the Dodgers to make up the gap with the Braves, it's either through trade or hope that one of those minor leaguers explodes. Let's change topics because that's literally all I have. Pouring through the news was the last step I took before turning on that button to start recording. As of Monday night, Cooper Kupp was still in Minnesota to see a specialist on his damaged hamstring. This now calls into question whether Kupp will be able to play in Sunday's season opener. The dude has missed the entire preseason, which I will grant you is typical for Rams starters, but he also has rarely practiced during training camp. So do you realize how much of a big of an ask that would be to have Kupp play? You'd be asking him to take a cross-country flight back west in the middle of the week, practice as if he hasn't missed a step, and know the game plan in time for Sunday. That is an extremely tall order. The LA Times, for their part, bonked on a story on who replaces Cooper Kupp. They listed 4 receivers as possible starters. The Rams don't start 1 wide receiver, they start 3. What are you, stupid? Van Jefferson isn't a potential replacement for Cooper Kupp. He's already a starter. So the question for the preseason was always, who was the 3rd wideout? You had 3 receivers left in battle to be that 3rd wideout. That was Tutu Atwell, Puka Nacua, a rookie, and Ben Skowronek. 2 of those 3 are going into the game on Sunday as a starter, provided that Kupp doesn't have some miraculous comeback. Now, unlike Urias, who might not be a big blow if he misses out for the Dodgers, missing Cooper Kupp is a big blow for the Rams' fortunes. There's no question about it. Before Kupp's season ended last year with an ankle injury, Cooper Kupp was targeted more than 1/3 of the time when Matthew Stafford dropped back to pass. You cannot understate how important Cooper Kupp actually is to the LA Rams. CBSSports.com forecasts the Rams will win only 5 games, and if that's the case, that would likely put them in the top 5 of next year's draft. And I know that there are people who believe that LA will tank for Caleb Williams. You're going to need a lot fewer wins than 5. We've spent a lot of time talking about the Rams' defensive rebuild. Watching rookies during preseason, honestly, has been cringe at best. But when the season beginning this weekend, I want to give you a reason for a little cautious optimism. It's going to be compelling to watch linebacker Ernest Jones. More so than Aaron Donald. You know what you're going to get from Aaron Donald. But last year was Jones's first full year as a starter. He tallied 114 tackles. The coaching staff was willing to let surefire Hall of Famer Bobby Miller go, specifically because they do believe that Ernest Jones is ready for the job. So keep an eye on Ernest Jones. Now, the following is unlikely to happen for the Rams, but there's an emergency quarterback rule that came about as a result of last year's playoff game between the 49ers and the Eagles. San Francisco was down to his 4th stringer in the game. Rules were reworked so that you could hide a quarterback in case of emergency. Then you break the glass. As a result, if you've noticed on a lot of NFL rosters now, there were only 2 quarterbacks on the roster. But to allow yourself a 3rd quarterback who does not count against the roster, you have to follow certain roster guidelines. Bingo, the Rams did not follow those guidelines. So if both Matthew Stafford and Stetson Bennett get injured during a game, No idea. Literally none. The Galactic Tribune, which you can find on Substack, is reporting that Mercurial midfielder Efren Alvarez will be on the move to Club Tijuana of Liga MX. Now, Alvarez's time in LA has been one of profound disappointment. I'm a Galaxy fan. If you are not, I'm going to tell you, and you can kind of imagine for the teams in LA that you do like, how big of a disappointment this is. He was considered can't miss back in 2019. Back then, the MLS had secondary teams that they would put in USL, the United Soccer League. Alvarez was the youngest signing in USL history by LA Galaxy. The previous youngest signee was Alphonso Davies. Alphonso Davies did live up to the hype. He now plays for German powerhouse Bayern Munich. Massive, huge things were predicted for Efren Alvarez. Two countries were fighting over which team Alvarez would play for in World Cup or qualifiers. He was born in Los Angeles. He instead chose to play for Mexico. That was seen as a huge win for the Mexicans back then. During Zlatan Ibrahimovic's 2 years in LA, he saw so much potential in Alvarez that he took him under his wing and said Alvarez was the best young talent in MLS. And when the Galaxy played in Charlotte last season, the first home game for the expansion club in front of more than 70,000 people, Alvarez arced in a golazo from outside the penalty area. Beautiful shot. Everybody thought this kid was can't miss. Since then, without having met the young man, to be honest with you, it looks as if he believed his own hype and just straight up got fat. Believed the hype. Stopped working to match the hype. I saw the Galaxy play in Portland at the start of the year. I was in the third row. I watched all the players warm up. Alvarez looked by far the most heaviest player on the team, and he's 21. He was closer to my weight than the listed weight of 150 pounds. Meanwhile, LA, frankly, they were finally had enough. They couldn't run him out there because he couldn't keep weight. Soccer is a sport for extremely fit people in terms of aerobic activity. They rebuilt their midfield without him. He was supposed to anchor the midfield. They rebuilt it twice, for Pete's sakes, without him in mind. There were questions as to whether or not Alvarez even wanted to play. He hasn't even been included as a possible substitution in the Galaxy's last 3 matches. So his career is not over because he's 21, but he's going to have to go a long way to convince people that he deserved this unending hymn of praise as a teenager. LAFC's Carlos Vela, for reasons I don't quite get, meanwhile, slammed Zlatan Ibrahimovic, claiming the guy who played for the Galaxy 2 years, quote, didn't win anything, unquote. Look, I'm not an LAFC hater. I'm ambivalent towards LAFC. They're part of the LA community. Welcome to the family, right? But if Vela was smart enough to limit his conversation to MLS, sure, he'd be right. But he didn't, so he sounds like a bitterman. Zlatan Ibrahimovic has won 33 trophies. 33 in his career. Matter of fact, the last time the dude was on the pitch as a player, he was holding up the trophy for AC Milan having won Serie A. So tap the brakes, Carlos. You're out of your league on this one. CBSSports.com is predicting the Chargers will miss the playoffs with a record of 9-8. Now, the writer offers no rationale other than to say the Bolts are on the verge of greatness, but that they are jinxed. That is not good enough, guys. Sorry. Not a good enough reason. Another writer for the same website thinks that 9-8 is the floor for the Bolts, and that Brandon Staley, though, has to win a playoff game to keep his gig. Now, that's a fair assessment. The writer forecasts the Chargers' best case scenario is to go 12-5 and get bounced in the divisional round. Now, also with the Chargers, I understand that the game changes schematically, the X's and O's. But every time a fullback loses his job, an angel softly weeps. Xander Horvath was cut by the Chargers. That sucked. Don't get me wrong, the dude did land a job with Pittsburgh, but the Steelers put him on the practice squad. The fact that the Bolts had a fullback was really endearing to me. I will be sitting in the bathtub, clutching myself to see if I still feel crying nonstop after I finish this clip. USC has a commitment from wide receiver Jamiron Baker, the Los Alamitos High School's class of 2026. Quote, "I've always wanted to go to USC, so I didn't see any reason to hold off," he said. I don't hide the fact that I have grieved a deep grieving over the Trojans' defense, but here is a stat which might lead to optimism. The 49 rushing yards allowed Saturday to Nevada were the lowest in a game since 2019, when Arizona State gained just 47. Not that all of my predictions come true. I bought meme coin cryptocurrency and I'm still eating pork and beans. But when Jennifer Cohen took the AD job at USC, I speculated she would lose her place on the College Football Playoff Committee. The committee that chooses the teams that go to the playoff is comprised of an athletic director from each of the 5 most powerful conferences. USC is heading to the Big Ten, which means that conference would have had 2 athletic directors. Cohen has left. She's being replaced by Utah's Mark Harlan. Now, you might be scratching your head on that one, but because after all, Utah is also leaving the Pac-12 for the Big 12. But the Big 12 representative is Kansas State's Gene Taylor. He is in the final year of a 3-year run. So that's how the CFP is going to continue on. Yesterday, we discussed how Chip Kelly will keep alive his 3-quarterback system for UCLA for at least another week. I was telling you that the scribes have already fallen in love with freshman Dante Moore. Even after Kelly went to bat for the other guys, Ethan Garbers and Colin Schlee, ESPN and the LA Times' Ben Bolch picked up the mantle for Moore. All I can say is to repeat, quarterback controversies are not good news for football teams. Finally, in a curious move, the Lakers and Spurs traded G League players yesterday. The Austin Spurs will get returning player rights, whatever the hell that is, to Chaundi Brown, who did get some playing time with the LA Lakers last season. They'll also get a 2nd-round pick. That's what makes it curious. LA gets back returning player rights for guard Javante McCoy. It's curious because the Lakers tend to hit on late draft picks. So what's with sending a 2nd-round pick to San Antonio? Just asking. I have no idea. But you let me know what you think in the comments thread. Tell me what you think about Julio Urias or Cooper Kupp. And for that matter, if you're a Galaxy fan, are you finally happy to have the Efren Alvarez question resolved? And if you enjoyed this content, and boy, there was a lot of it, don't forget to subscribe to Faithful Angelenos. We're talking LA sports every single day here. Thank you for watching. I'm James. We'll be back tomorrow. Faithful Angelenos is a Kian Corta El Queso production. Take care.